Welcome to this second part of this series on meditation, mind, and spirituality. The title for the second part is Meditation, Silence, and Nothingness. Now, as you know, it is well known that meditators go into silence and nothingness. They empty their mind. But the truth of the matter is that this silence is deafening in loudness and full of spiritual meaning. Now, we will delve into that. But let's recall this. In the first part, we talked about the science in investigating meditation. There are more sleep waves in the brain. There's a calmed amygdala, so there's bliss and tranquility. There's 70% more dopamine, which causes addiction and visualization. And all this keeps the meditator going, addicted to the process. And then, in relation to the frontal lobe, there's low blood flow. The frontal lobe goes offline, and the parietal is deactivated. And when the frontal lobe goes offline, the scientists tell you it is self-hypnosis. And they have told you how it really works, how the hypnosis really works. So in hypnotic suggestion, when the neural phenomena kicks in, and it is spontaneous, you can't say selectively, I want my amygdala calm, and nothing else. All right? The suggestion kicks in, and the hypnotic suggestion kicks in, and you've got this sense, and they call it nirvana, liberation, presence of God. That's what Christians call it now, or oneness with God. Now, all the above gets the mind of the meditator to non-dual divinity. In other words, oneness with the universe, and the Christians doing it positions it as oneness with God himself. Now, the opposite is true in relation to biblical meditation. Now, we saw how King David in Psalms 19, when he meditated, he was in love with the bridegroom, Christ, and he expected a marriage. And he got to a point where he wanted to be faultless before God. He wanted his sins revealed and cleansed. He made himself transparent to God. That secret faults are revealed to him. Presumptuous sins are revealed to him. And therefore he got to a point which I call, or we should call, sanctified unity. And we referred to Hebrews 2:11 and Matthew 25:40, where in relation to sanctification, Jesus himself says that both he who sanctifies and they who are sanctified are one. That's unity. That's sanctified unity. And in relation to Matthew 25:40, the king, post-judgment, he calls the ones on the right brethren. In other words, the sanctified ones. So sanctified unity is crucial. It's the outcome of true biblical meditation. Now, in this quote, in this Buddhist quote, it says, the price of freedom is simply choosing to be liberated, or to be, liberation is in the mind. In other words, it's in the mind only. But for Christianity, we are a indivisible whole. We are indivisible in the sense that we are both physical, mental, and spiritual. Undivided. We can't say we only have a mind that's liberated. We can't do things in our body that is inconsistent with spiritual values. So, this thought is universal consciousness. To be just conscious in the mind that we are one universally, physically, and limited to the universe. God as a person is not in the picture. Now, in this thing called breath prayers and meditation, this is a graphic to show that through the breath, one is connected to the universe. That's how it is in their imagination. Now, we talked about Buddha's non-dual, where he was liberated from karma and from reincarnation. And therefore, in his mind, in his altered reality, he was liberated from good and evil, life and death. And there was no distinction in that mind, no differentiation between sin and righteousness, heaven and hell, God and Satan. Hence, in the pantheistic thought, where all things is equal to God, not God as a person, but all things being equal to God, they say all is God. That's pantheism. All is God, and God is one. In other words, all is one, universal. And here is the icon of meditation. At one point, the meditator is himself. At the next point, in deeper meditation, he merges with the cosmic ocean. He is one with the universe. Now, this sets a scene for us to talk about where meditative techniques are taking Christianity. Now, this is Father Thomas Keating. He is the founder of something called centering prayer. And this is a quote of a 3-step journey in centering prayer. Let me read it with you. The spiritual journey is the realization, not just the information, but the real interior conviction that there is higher power or God. Or to make it as easy as possible for everybody, there is an other, capital O. Now, this and other, capital O, he's changed it from God to a generic other with a capital O. In other words, this is for everybody, the God for everyone. Right? Second step, to try to become the other, still a capital O. And the third step, and finally, he says, the realization that there is no other. You and the other are one. Have always been, always will be. You just think you aren't. Now, this is chock-a-block full of spiritual meaning. Finally, there is no other. You and the other are one. In other words, in centering prayer, which is meditative, the meditator and the other are one, to the point that there is no other. In other words, God and the meditator are indistinguishably one. Always have been, always will be. Always have been. When? From birth. Inborn divinity. Connected to the divinity and becoming one. Always will be. Always will be. Always saved. That's the suggestion. You just think you are. You aren't. Even when you think you aren't, you still are. In other words, it was inborn, always will be, and you're always at one with the one, the God of everyone. That's where they're going. So, in this panentheistic quote, there is God, the person, but he penetrates the universe and penetrates us. He is suggesting, which is not true, penetrates everyone to the point that we are united whether we know it or not. Now, Eastern meditators, what they're saying is this. When they meditate, they discover their inner divinity. Now, everyone has that inner divinity. So, if I meditate and I discover it, but you do not meditate, and you have not discovered it, you still have inner divinity. It makes us still one. I've discovered it, you haven't, but we both still have it. It's all inclusiveness, and that's how they sell it. It's positioned as love, all inclusive. And so here is that picture again. That's pantheism. God equals the universe, or universe equals God, not as a person, but as the universe, as things. And panentheism, where God penetrates the universe, so that the universe itself, so penetrated, so saturated, is like this. It's like pantheism. So pantheism is a subset of panentheism. But the truth is theism. God created the universe. He sanctifies those who want to be sanctified. But the panentheists talk on both sides to the point that the truth, theism, is lost. Now, I want to trace with you how non-dual or non-duality or pantheism and panentheism have evolved through history, where it started and where it is going. Now, the next slide. It's a quote from Ellen White. Let's read it together. She says, Satan has long been preparing for his final effort to deceive the world. The foundation of his work was laid by the assurance given to Eve in Eden. Ye shall not surely die. In the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. She describes that the foundation of his work was laid, and the foundation is the immortal soul. But what does it all mean in relation to what I'm saying? Right? Now, I want you to imagine what happened as I use some practical to simplify the point I'm trying to make. What happened was there was God, and God was all good, perfectly good. But Satan said, come away from God, come over to me. I have something better, even better. And it was Ellen White who said that Satan insinuated that God was holding back away from Adam and Eve something better. So how much better? Satan has said, come over to my side. I have something even better. On my side, you will not surely die. On my side, your eyes will be open. And my side, you will be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now, what did he mean, knowing good and evil? If he meant, come on, come over to my side, come away from God, who is absolutely good. On my side, if he meant, on my side, you will know how to discern between good and evil. Eve would have discerned good and evil and leapt back to God. But what he's saying is, come on to my side. And on my side, we go beyond good and evil. Good and evil is not differentiated. You are at liberty. Leave God and you will still live. Leave God and it will be better. Leave God and it will be even better. So, non-differentiation. On my side, you cannot distinguish between good and evil. On my side, they are intermingled. On my side, sometimes it appears good, sometimes it appears evil. On my side, they're so intermingled that at times you cannot tell the difference. That's the meaning of what Satan was suggesting. So, sin and live, right? So, here was that foundation, that lie, the meaning of that lie, the foundation of his work was laid in the lie of the immortal soul. You shall not surely die. And to come away in confidence that you will not die, that it is better, and that you do not need to distinguish between good and evil. So here was a tree, and that was the message. And tracing it through history, post-flood, the people gathered and built the Tower of Babel. Now, the Tower of Babel was to make a name for themselves. It was not just fearing that God will flood the world again. It was more than that. Fearing, yes. Not trusting God, yes. But wanting to have a reputation of themselves against God. That was the meaning of that tower. And there was sun worship. And there was the immortal soul, because Nimrod was deified, made God after his death. So here was panentheism. In other words, pan is all, theism is God, all is God, and the God end means God within. So Nimrod was deified after he died. Now, the word is Sanskrit. It is a sound that, when they meditate now, they hit this brass bowl, and that sound goes resonating across the universe. And it goes, and that's So that one, in following that sound in meditative silence, is one with the universe. That's how it is used. But that sound goes back in Sanskrit into Hinduism at its beginning. And that may have been 500 years after the Great Flood and 200 years after the Tower of Babel. So that word, that that meditative meaning, was there 200 years after the Tower of Babel. Now, what does mean? Right? Means, amongst all things, Atman and Brahman are one. Man and God are one. Now, in the East, you may have seen this sign, the yin-yang sign. Right? The yin-yang sign is like that. And the meaning of it is this. The black. Here is the bad. The white. Here is the good. That black dot in the white is here's the bad, that is in the good. And the white dot in the black is here is the good, that is in the bad. And here is life. Life to them, in the yin-yang concept, is a fusion of good and evil as one. In other words, non-differentiating. In life, it is not about being good and trying to be good and being sanctified and wanting to be good with God and being raised from glory to glory. Life is a combination, a fusion, a mingling of good and evil. Now, the cartoonists, they realize this, so they paint the white side with a halo and angel's wings, and the black side with a horn and a fork. They understand this. Life is evil, and evil is life. That's how people see it. And they're graphically illustrated. And here is an interlocking of white and black. Interlocked, separate, inseparable, forever. Now, in Eastern meditation, the body is evil, but the mind is good. And in the mind is another man, the other, the true self. And in meditation, that's what they are going for, the true self. In modern cartoons, there is the little man in every man's head. And he says, hi, I'm the mental property. This is the real me. Right? My spirit is always good. My motives are good. Whatever I do with my body is okay. It's something else. There is this division of man between his physical and his motives. And in an old Buddhist drawing, Buddha is drawn with a kind of an embryo of Buddhahood inside. And the statement is, meditation is listening to the divine within. Now, in Tai Chi, you may have seen people doing Tai Chi, right? There are the Chinese folks mainly, and now it's popular amongst even Westerners. They go through this motion of very fluid motion. And I, as an Asian, had always thought it to be a balance between hard and soft. And they flow the hard back into the soft and so forth. But no, if you look at what Tai Chi aims to do, it is the master. It's a master when he is able to fuse opposites, yin and yang, polar opposites, into his fluid motion, into one supreme ultimate. He's a master only when he fuses into one supreme ultimate. Now, is there something more supreme and more ultimate than a supreme ultimate? To them, there is no God. So this supreme ultimate is the supreme ultimate. And so it is a fusion of polar opposites, of good and evil, into one supreme ultimate. That is when he's a master. You are a novice if you think you're just balancing things. Right? So that's the meaning. And that's what they do. Now, people who do this know that it is meditation in physical action. It is not sitting passively. It is active meditation. Now, there are computer games for the young, Beyond Good and Evil. There are graphics that say the good evil. It's a fusion of good and evil. It's a non-differentiation. Fusion means non-differentiation. There are graphics that show, I hope you can see it, the evil within the red graphic of good. See it? Now, that is the yin-yang sign. Now with a rainbow. Right? Not boy, not girl. A fusion of sexes. And here is a graphic showing fluid gender. Now, I was looking through a magazine, and I caught sight of what appeared to be a well-dressed, good-looking woman. And it said she is one of the first fluid gender models. In other words, and I took a closer look when it said that she looks somewhat like a boy and like a girl. So it was indistinguishable. A fluid, non-dual gender. In Shakespeare, in Hamlet, it says, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. In other words, good or bad is just of your own making. It's relative. So there is the idea of non-differentiation. Now, Baphomet, this awful statue, was erected in the US, and BBC got interested and investigated what it meant. And BBC said this: Baphomet is a hermaphrodite, not male, not female. It joins together human and animal, male and female, above and below. Here's the non-dual idea of mergence of opposites. He embodies opposites, celebrates contrast. He reconciles opposites. He looks at differences without conflict. Two in one. And you can see that meaning held in his hand, which he holds up. Two is not two, but one. Now, this statue was to be set opposite the Ten Commandments. Why? It was not in opposition to the Ten Commandments, they say. But it is to set opposite the Ten Commandments, not in opposition, but in celebration of contrast. So, opposites are not opposites. That's what they're saying. Now, evolution. What's the difference between Baphomet and evolution? Not one bit. Now, Abraxas, and this is Carl Jung, the noted psychiatrist. He's quoting this. Abraxas, that which is spoken by God the Son is life. That which is spoken by the devil is death. But Abraxas speaketh that hallowed and accursed word, which is life and death at the same time. Abraxas begetteth truth and lying, good and evil, light and darkness, in the same word and in the same act. Wherefore is Abraxas terrible? And he added that Abraxas is then because of this, more supreme than the Christian God. In other words, Abraxas, which encompasses both, which mingles good and evil, who does not differentiate between God and Satan, life and death, good and evil, is supreme. So here is Abraxas, a non-dual spiritualistic God. Now, in Greek philosophy, Plato says this: because God and the spirit world is where all good comes from, then spiritual things are only things that are good. This also means that physical universe we live in is automatically crippled, automatically prone towards weakness. So there is a dichotomy. The spirit is good, the body is vile. Now that is not Christianity. That's the opposite of Christianity. We are made whole, indivisibly. That's when it really counts. And so in Greek philosophy, there is thesis on one side and antithesis on the other. Truth is not here, not there. It is found in the middle, somewhere, in the mingling, in synthesis. Here is a philosophy that is non-dual. Now, Goldman Sachs, a top bank, World Bank, all over the world. William George, a current Goldman Sachs board, and a former chief executive of the healthcare giant Medtronic, started meditating in 1974 and never stopped. Today, he's one of the main advocates for bridging meditation into corporate life, writing articles on the subject for the Harvard Business Review. So meditation has taken on what is called a mindful revolution. Now, mindfulness is the sanitized word for Eastern meditation. Mindfulness has become therapy for stress, for depression, and it is in the transformation and wellness movement for transformation. So meditation has reached the health and transformation movement. It's come into the secular. It's cool. It's social. It's acceptable. In Davos G20, Goldie Hawn and Ricard Mathieu, a Buddhist monk, a French Buddhist monk, they went into Davos 20 with where the leaders of the top 20 nations met. Tony Abbott, at that time your prime minister, was there, and they taught mindfulness or meditation for stress relief. Now, this non-dual spiritualistic unity is being formed. It has, the Eastern meditation has come into the West in a big way. The ideas of non-duality are now accepted on both sides and growing, and it has gone into the secular, the kings of the earth. Davos 20, it's gone into schools, it's gone into hospitals, it's gone into psychotherapy. Now, we talked about panentheism, how it is dubious, how it is dangerous. And in the East, pantheism is expressed as God is one and God is all. Now, the emergent church, which has taken on meditation, they call it contemplative spirituality or contemplative Christianity. This is how they position their thinking and align it with the East. Let me try to compare for you two sermons, two teachings. All right? The East teaches it this way. God is everywhere. He is in the flowers and the trees and in the air. He is divine and in every man. And when you realize in meditation and discover that His essence in you, you will be transformed. You will realize the divinity and your connection with the universe. You will realize it naturally, organically, as your eyes are being opened in meditation. All right, that's the East. Now the West, the emergent church, will preach it similarly. God, you have no choice. You are immersed in God's unconditional love. Everything is so saturated, so immersed in God's amazing grace. His love is like $1 billion. And when you take a $1 note and you stack up $1 billion, it will fill this whole stadium. And we don't realize it in our life. We're too busy. But if you should change your spiritual focus, if you should see that love, that $1 billion, your life will be transformed. Naturally, organically, automatically. You cannot help but be transformed. Now, in this teaching, in the West, in the Christianity, there is no mention of conversion, of repentance, of sharing in the death and resurrection of Christ, in atonement or sanctification. So, if you compare the two, with the absence of truth, what do you find? You find the emergent church using unconditional love, claiming it's everywhere, and they're teaching that God's love saturates the whole universe, penetrates the whole universe, that you have, when you realize it, discover it like the East, you will be transformed like the East. So, in the East, they say God is one and God is all. In the West, in the emergent church, they would probably say Jesus one, Jesus all. Now, Wagner, he was part of the 1888 movement. And then, history tells us that he lost his way. He joined Battle Creek, Kellogg. And Kellogg was accused and proven to be using pantheistic sentiments in his book, The Living Temple. And in 1903, E.J. Wagner, who was already with Kellogg, wrote a letter to Prescott. And he said this: "There is a difference as great as the distance between heaven and earth, and the east and west, and between the truth that God is in everything," which is, he's saying, between the truth that God is in everything, and that is panentheism. God is in everything. God saturates the universe with his love, and God is in everything. And the lie that everything is God, which is pantheism. Everything is God is pantheism. So, Wagner is saying there's a big difference between panentheism and pantheism. Panentheism is truth, and pantheism is error. Indeed, he continues, there is no alternative between the truth that God is in everything, the truth of panentheism, and pantheism. The truth, God is above all and through all and in all, which is pantheism, is the sure safeguard against the error that everything is God, pantheism. So Wagner is saying pantheism is wrong, is an error. But the truth is panentheism. Now, we've learned that pantheism is just a subset of panentheism. And so, by being in the presence of pantheistic ideas, that God is theistic, that we need sanctification, that God is not in everything, He does not saturate the universe, that after the fall, the universe, our world, is full of good and evil. That we need to differentiate. That sanctification is the way. That differentiation and being discerning and being acutely discerning, being completely reliant on God is crucial for our life. That seems to have been lost with the belief that God saturates everything in His love. Now, the Bible speaks about unconditional love, but the unconditional love of God works in us that we, to the point that we respond unconditionally, that we love God with all our heart, all our soul, all our mind. That's when it really matters. So we come into oneness in sanctification and finally in marriage. And Hebrews 2:11 and Matthew 25:40 emphasizes that over and over again. In Hebrews 2:11, let's remind ourselves, it says, "For both He, Christ, that sanctifies, and they who are sanctified are all of one." Both are one. That's unity. That is sanctified unity. And for which cause He is not ashamed to call them brethren or brothers. And the king, in a post-judgment scene, calls the ones on the right brethren. And in that context, he said, "What? That you have visited me in prison, clothed me when I'm naked, fed me when I'm hungry? Although you may not have done it for me when you've done it amongst the least of these, my brethren, you've done it to me." In other words, We are one. What you do to them, you do to me. And what you do to me, you do to them. And you are brethren, brothers in sanctification. So here is a contrast between the East, the emergent church, and what Christ and God wants to do for us. Now, Thomas Merton, he is required reading. He is the founder of contemplative prayer. He is a Catholic priest. Now, I want to read his quote for you. And as I read, I want you to think and reflect whether you see the connection between what he's saying and what Satan said to Eve in Eden, right, about the immortal soul. At the center of our being is a point of nothingness, which is untouched by sin and by illusion, a point of pure truth, a point or spark which belongs entirely to God. Because when you die, that is all that is left. When we die, everything is destroyed except that one thing, which is our reality. Now, it is God, but it is also our reality that God preserves forever. He will not permit its final destruction. And he continues, for it is from that center that everything else comes. Contemplative prayer is nothing other than coming into consciousness of what is already there. Now, did he say, you shall not surely die? Clearly he said that. Did he say, your eyes will be open? Now this phrase, coming into consciousness, it is your eyes will be open. Did he say you'll be as gods? Yes, you won't die. Right? You will not die when you have that center. Did he say, and you shall know good and evil? Yes, he said that because he said that you can do what you want. This center is untouched by sin. In other words, even if you sin, it is untouched by sin. He said all that. Now, Pope Francis, when he went to Congress at the end of 2016, he said this to Congress. He pointed to a relief of Moses on the wall, and he told Congress, you, like Moses, Congress has to make laws that bring people directly to God. And to bring people directly to God means to unite people. And then he said to Congress, to unite people, to bring peace between people and religion, you need to look at the contemplative style of Father Thomas Merton. Why? Because Father Thomas Merton, in his contemplative style, does not distinguish between good and evil, between sin and righteousness. And the Pope emphasized this. He said, to bring peace with people, another temptation which we must especially guard against is the simplistic reductionism which sees only good and evil, or if you will, the righteous and the sinner. We must not be that simple, he's saying. In order to unite people, we must not distinguish between good and evil, between righteous and sinners. And then he said, we must confront every form of polarization which would divide into these two camps. So, how do we do this? We must look at the contemplative style of Father Thomas Merton. So he suggested to Congress, to the US, that they should look at contemplation. And then, the day before, he addressed the United Nations. And after his address, Shakira sang a song in his honor. And the song was John Lennon's song, The Beatles, 40 years ago or more. And the title of the song was, Imagine There's No Heaven. And the lyrics go, imagine there's no heaven, blah, 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 no hell below us, and no religion too. And the whole world lives as one. Now, where did this song come from? 45 years ago, the Beatles were meditating. TM, Transcendental Meditation, with Maharishi Guru. And out of that inspiration of non-dual spiritualism came the song, where there is no concept, no distinction between heaven and hell, no religion too. And then they are suggesting that the whole world can be as one. And so Pope Francis is devoted to the God in all things. This is quoted in the UK Telegraph and the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities. It says, Francis is a Jesuit, and his long, arduous formation as a priest was founded on the spiritual exercises of St. Ignatius. To think that the leader of the Catholic Church is one who follows the tradition of Ignatius, whose life has been devoted to the finding of God in all things. Now, in the United Nations, there's a meditation room, but it's not dedicated to meditation. It's dedicated to world peace, to unity. So meditation is now the foundation for world peace and unity. Now, where is all this in the Bible? Now, that's most important. I'm sure you're asking that already. In the Bible, it says very clearly, you must distinguish. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. And it says in the Bible, those who take light for darkness and darkness for light are in trouble. Now, in Ezekiel 8:16, it describes this. You see, in the Bible, in the old time, like now, Satan did not say, leave God and worship me alone. He said you can do both. And light for darkness and darkness for light is to do both. And in Ezekiel 8:16, what happened was there was a sanctuary. And the people were worshiping with their faces, worshiping the sun, facing the east. Now, when do you think they were worshiping the sun facing the east? Probably on a Sunday. So here were the people of God in their sanctuary, supposedly to worship on a Sabbath, and they were worshiping the sun. Non-dual, not distinguishing truth from error. And Laodicea is neither cold nor hot. It's like two taps, hot and cold, mingled together. Neither cold nor hot. Apostate Israel was worshiping both, to the point that Elijah had to come and make a distinction. So, it is all in the Bible, but more so, even more so. In Zephaniah 1:7, it says this, hold thy peace at the presence of the Lord, for the day of the Lord is at hand. Now, if we apply that to the future, to today and the future, the day of the Lord is when Jesus comes, right? And it shall come to pass at that time that I will search Jerusalem, Christianity today, with candles, and punish the men that are settled on their lease. Now, lease is like sediment. These men are so settled in their mind, like sediment, that say in their heart, the Lord will not do good, neither will he do evil. Christianity at large, because they involve themselves in the ideas of the immortality of the soul, because they involve themselves with Eastern religion and traditions, because they imbibe their sentiment and their practices, will come to a point that they perceive the Lord as one who will not do good, neither will he do evil. In Malachi 2:17, it says this, we have wearied the Lord with our words. Yet you say, wherein have we wearied him? When you say, everyone that doeth evil is good in the sight of the Lord, and he delighteth in them. So the perception of God by the people of God is that everyone who does evil is good in the sight of the Lord. And not only that, he delighteth in them. And in so doing, with their praises and prayers, they weary the Lord. And then it concludes, where is the God of judgment? When God does not differentiate, or when people do not differentiate, or when God particularly doesn't differentiate, there is no judgment. And it contravenes directly the first angel's message. Fear God, for this is the hour of his judgment. So spiritualism, Ellen White said this, Satan has long been preparing for his final effort to deceive the world. the foundation of his work was laid by the assurance given to Eve, you shall not surely die. In the day you eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and you shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now we read that. But she added this. Little by little, he has prepared the way for his masterpiece of deception in the development of spiritualism. He has not yet reached the full accomplishment of his designs, but it will be reached in the last remnant of time. So the foundation was laid in Eden, the immortal soul. Satan developed it step by step until it becomes a masterpiece of spiritualism at the end of time. And it sweeps in the whole world. It's not just Greek philosophy. It's just not the deception and errors in the old times. It also sweeps in the East. Now, the East, as you saw, is inundated with meditation, with yoga, with Tai Chi, right? With Zen meditation. It's cultural. It's even religious in many forms of modern corrupted religion in the East. The East did not have Judeo-Christianity to hold back that tidal wave. And the East is saturated. Now, the West had taken on Eastern sentiments. It's come into the church. It's come into therapy and so forth. When the West is inundated and saturated, both East and West are saturated. And Satan will have his way. And she said, says the prophet, I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs. They are the spirits of devils working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and the whole world, and gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. So this spiritualism, this kind of meditative, non-dual spiritualism has saturated the East, it's saturating the West. And it not only saturates the religious folks, but it reaches to the kings of the earth. The mindfulness revolution. It has reached therapy and schools and Christianity. It brings the whole world to that battle. Now, what is the wine of Babylon? The wine of Babylon, Ellen White says, the wine of Babylon is the exalting of the false and spurious Sabbath. That's number 1. Above the Sabbath which the Lord Jehovah hath blessed and sanctified for the use of man. And number 2, the pagan teaching of the immortality of the soul. She said, these, in other words, spurious Sabbath and the pagan teaching of the immortality of the soul, these and kindred heresies and the rejection of the truth convert the church into Babylon. Now, what is important to bear in mind is this. Most times when I ask people, what is the wine of Babylon? They will say, heresies. All sorts of heresies, confusion. And it is true. But Ellen White highlighted 2. The spurious Sabbath and the immortality of the soul. Those are the active ingredients of the wine of Babylon. So we are not to say or to proclaim heresies, heresies, heresies. We are to focus on the 2 active ingredients. And the immortality of the soul is one, and the immortality of the soul is the very foundation and basis of all false meditation. Now, there is one message, the 3 angels' message, particularly the 2nd angel's message, the wine of Babylon, that directly denunciates non-dual spiritualism, paganism, and contemplative Christianity. And that is particularly in the 2nd angel's message. Now, I want to make this emphasis, that the 2nd angel's message focuses us. It gives us the everlasting gospel. All right? Now, the 3 angels' message, the 1st angel's message says, worship God, who made the heavens and the earth. That is the sign of our sanctification. But it says, fear God. The fear of the Lord, the awe of the Lord, the love of the Lord is to hate evil. The more we love God, the more we hate evil. And when we hate evil, we want to be freed of it. We seek the sanctification of Christ. And as He sanctifies us, He cuts self from the soul. And at the end, He calls us brothers. Brothers in sanctified unity. That is the first angel's message. And the first angel's message contains the sign. Worship Him who made heavens and the earth. That Sabbath is a sign of our unity. Right? A sign of sanctified unity. But the enemy of this sanctified unity, the enemies are identified in the second and third angel's message. And particularly, I'm focusing on the second angel's message. The second angel's message warns us that the immortality of the soul is the strength and foundation of evil. And it is the enemy of the first message. And so there is a mighty clash. It is sanctified unity versus a false unity. And the false unity grows, and the sympathy grows until a sign is given for that unity. And that sign is the legislation of Sunday. So this contrast, this conflict, this almighty clash is growing. There are two unities forming before our very eyes today. So when we see unity today between Catholicism and Protestantism, and we see the emerging church with the ambition of uniting all religion, we must not see this as, a Catholic and Protestant social unity. It is a threefold union involving spiritualism as the third and most active component. But it also uses meditation and contemplation as the basis for assuring everyone that God is with them, or God is already in them. Now, in the next video, I'm going to show you how the East has, through the conduit of churches, brought Eastern meditation and its sentiments into the Western church. So, please, continue with me and watch the third episode. Thank you very much, and may God bless you.